Hey everyone, thank you for joining me. So today I have 5 knives from Kansept that I want to do a full review on. And I had about 3 weeks with all of these models, so I got pretty familiar with them and was able to pick out some likes and dislikes, which I'd like to share with you guys. And also one more thing is I did a cardboard cut test with all of these blades, and I gotta say they performed very, very well. I just didn't want to bore you guys with footage of me cutting cardboard. But I can reassure you guys that these cut through cardboard very, very easily. With that being said, let's start off with the Arcus. This is coming in at $188. And for that price point, you're getting titanium, micarta, and a Damascus blade. Since the blade is out, we'll start with that. We have a reverse tanto, possibly a Wharncliffe style shape blade. I'm leaning more towards reverse tanto. You do have flat ground bevels, leading to that razor sharp cutting edge. You have a nice swedge right above the top of the fullers. You have dual fullers, which work really great in the deployment area, but more on that in just a bit. You even have the faintest little swedge here at the tip, exposing more of that cool Damascus pattern, which this Damascus is beautifully done. I love Kansept's Damascus. I think it looks really, really good. You also have some jimping here in the front, which is done very well. I just wish they would have extended it or moved it forward, basically where your thumb lands. And then you also have some jimping here on the flipper tab that works very well too. So blade is awesome. I think it looks good and it performs very well. Moving on to the handle, you have a titanium construction with those micarta inlays on both sides, which I think looks really good. This is a frame lock. You do get that steel insert, and you have a mill titanium pocket clip, which functions very, very well. They give you plenty of room in between the pocket clip and the scale for thicker pant pockets, so you're not going to be fighting this thing in and out of pocket. And I even like that little slit they put into the pocket clip to match the fuller. So we'll move over to the action on this blade. You do have a flipper tab and fullers for deployment. Flipper tab works great. I mean, this thing rockets out. Very smooth. This is writing on bearings. And yeah, no complaints with this flipper tab. Just super, super snappy. And really like the sound it makes when it flies out. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but just makes a great, great sound. Fullers work great. Reverse flick is very doable. You just got to get your fingernail in that fuller and then it just flies right out. Now the fuller for your thumb flick is, you just have to find the sweet spot. That's one thing I learned with this knife. You have to do it kind of slightly different, but it does function. My main way of opening this thing is the flipper tab, just because it's so addicting, and I think it feels good when it flies out. Really quick, want to give you guys some measurements. You have a 3.5-inch blade and a 4.5-inch handle. Overall 8-inch blade, or knife, sorry. And I have some knives here for a quick size comparison against the Para 3 here. Just a little bit bigger than the Para 3. Then I have also the mini Benchmade, which is going to be quite a bit larger. I'd say inch and a quarter, maybe bigger. But since this knife is so slim and slender, the ergos on it, it's really, really good. You have that neutral design underneath, and that flipper tab is a nice stopper there. Keep your hand from sliding forward. But ergos overall, I think, are amazing. Feels good. Even with that reverse grip, feels very good in hand. And you can choke up on, I wouldn't call it a front finger choil, but you can choke up on it. It's a little close to the cutting edge there, but if you need to choke up on it, it is there. And no hot spots. That pocket clip is beautifully done, so there is no issue there. Overall, really, really enjoy this thing, especially if you're looking for a gentleman carry or just something that's thin and light and just disappears in pocket. I think this would be a great option. So I just want to point out some dislikes. Again, very minor, but I had to find something on each of these models, so just want to let you guys know about that. So the inlays could have been a little bit tighter. Now, I don't know if it's due to the Texas heat. It is very hot outside. Maybe it shrunk it. I don't know, but that could have been a little bit better. And then the pocket clip wiggles just a tad. Again, not terrible, but it's just something I noticed. But other than those two things, I think this knife is great. I would definitely highly recommend this knife, especially for the price point and the materials. Really, really great. And that is the Arcus. So we'll move on to the next knife. Next up, we have the Quillin. And this is coming in at $89. And for that price point, you're getting red G10, full steel liners, and a Damascus blade, which is the same Damascus as the Arcus. Again, beautifully done by Kansept. Looks really, really good. And we'll start with the blade. We have a drop point style blade and just a minor harpoon shape to it as well. It's a beautiful swedge on that harpoon. And you do have dual fullers. Unfortunately, this one you can't use to deploy the blade, but more on that in just a bit. You have beautiful jimping placed where I think it should be placed. Like I mentioned earlier, I think more companies should put it where your thumb lands. But beautifully done. Definitely bites your thumb in a very good way. You do have full flat ground up to the bottom of the fuller. And again, a razor sharp factory edge. You also have some jimping on that flipper tab. Moving on to the scales, you do have red G10 scales, which is really nice. You don't see it that often, so I think it really, really pops. And to accent that red G10 material, they coated the hardware in red, which is interesting. Doesn't bother me, it's just something new, but I think it looks good. You do have full liners, full steel liners, as you can see here. So you know what that means for me. I can customize this thing. And a steel pocket clip, which is coated black. Also, the liners are coated black. I don't know if I mentioned that. But overall, I think it looks really good with the colors they chose. Quickly want to mention that the pocket clip works very well. You do have this high bill here towards the front, which I'll talk a little bit more about ergos. But it does give you enough room to slide into those thicker pant pockets, and you're not going to fight it that much either. Again, I'll get some footage of this thing in pocket so you can see what it looks like. But the pocket clip functions beautifully. No issues with that. Well, until we get to the ergos. But let's get to the action on this thing. So you only have a flipper tab for deployment, but that's okay because this thing functions beautifully. Very, very similar to the Arcus. Fires right out. It is riding on bearings, so the drop shut is very, very good. And you can maybe sometimes get that fuller, but you got to give it a little wrist flick. But I guess if you have thinner fingers or smaller fingers, you can get it. But flipper tab works great, so no issues in the deployment department. And similar with this one, or similar to the Arcus, makes a great sound. And yeah, I love it. I think the action and detent, everything was dialed in on this one, so feels really good. Now the ergos on it are excellent. Feels very, very good, but again, like I mentioned earlier, that high bill on the pocket clip, it's noticeable. It's not terrible, but it's definitely noticeable, especially when I was cutting through cardboard. I could definitely pick up on it more. I think if they just would have cut it back a little bit, I think it would have been just fine, because you definitely feel the top of it. So if it was cut down just a tad, I think it would feel 1,000 times better. That's really my only issue with this pocket clip, is it's noticeable. But reverse grip is really, really good. Again, that pocket clip is a little bit noticeable, but if you adjust your fingers a little bit, it disappears. Also, I want to give you guys some measurements. We have a 3.5 inch blade, and it's very similar size-wise to the Arcus. So a 4.5 inch handle. Overall length is 8 inches. Well, technically 8 1/8 inch, but I think it's a great size. Similar again to the Arcus. Really quick, I want to give you guys a size comparison with the Parrot 3. So just a little bit bigger. And then the mini Benchmade. But I do love the size of this. I think 8 inches is a great knife size, at least for my hand. I have medium-sized hands. Now moving on to the dislikes, which I'm sure you guys already know. I'm going to point out the pocket clip. Again, that bill is too high. Maybe even if they pushed it down, but definitely cut it back a little bit, I think would help. So that's one issue, a serious issue, I guess. And one more thing I wanted to mention was the filler tab. Since this is a reversible pocket clip, is not painted black, which is a little strange. I think it would have looked a lot better if it matched all the other steel components. But those are my 2 gripes with this knife. I would still recommend it just because it's a great size. It feels really good in hand other than that pocket clip. Yeah, I think it's a great design, and that action it's just really fidgety and fires out. But that is the Quillin, and we'll move on to the next knife. Here we have the BTF coming in at $129. You have a in-house carbon fiber material for the scales, which I think looks really good. This one's in green, but they do have other colors as well. You have full steel liners with a black wash finish and a steel deep carry pocket clip with that black wash finish as well. The black wash finish is continued onto the blade. This is a really nice Tonto shaped blade made of S35VN steel. So you're getting a great steel on this model. And to deploy this blade, you do have a titanium thumb disc. More on that in just a bit. I really love the milling they did with these grooves on the scales. I think it looks really good. I think they were going more for that bamboo look. It's definitely more noticeable on the G10 versions of these knives, but I still think it looks great on the carbon fiber. And it does help in the ergos department. The pocket clip works great. Again, it is a deep carry, and they gave you plenty of room for those thick pant pockets. Slides in and out of pocket very well. The pocket clip functions beautifully. There's no issues there. Even with the button head screws popping up, I didn't have an issue. I know some people don't like that. Visually, it might bother you, but I've never had an issue with these screws popping up like that. So again, pocket clip works great. However, in the ergos department, it's a bit of a hot spot, but more on that in just a second. The action on this knife is excellent. I mean, that blade fires out with that thumb disc. Reverse flick, no problem. Thumb flick, very, very easy. And having spent time with this knife, I still don't know how I feel about the thumb disc. I kind of wish they did a flipper tab on this just to keep it more clean and kind of more streamlined. This is the same designer as the Fusa. I'll put a picture up of the Fusa. You guys can kind of see why I like that one a little bit more. However, this one's a little bit larger than the Fusa. But again, I wish it was just a flipper tab. I think it would have been nicer. It's just this thumb disc. I did bump into it a few times when I was cutting through the cardboard. So maybe that's why I don't like it. But again, functionality-wise, the thumb disc works great. I don't have any complaints when it's being used for what it's meant for. It's 50-50 for me. Definitely a flipper tab would have been better, but that is the thumb disc there, again made of titanium, so you can anodize it. I guess it's a plus side to it. And access to the liner lock is very easy. I remember the prototype of this knife was difficult to get in there because they didn't do that cutout like you see here. So since they did the cutout here on the production model, it is a lot easier to get to that liner lock, which is very nice. I'm glad they fixed that from the prototype. So ease of access to the liner is really, really good. Again, drop shot action, very smooth. It is riding on bearings. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but very, very smooth. And moving on to the ergos, everything's great. Again, I love the milling they did with those, or the grooves they did with the milling. Feels very, very good in hand. However, that That darn pocket clip. If they would just get rid of that bill there in the front, I think the pocket clip would be perfect. I don't know why they can't just commit to a simple design pocket clip. I think it'd be a lot better. Even a milled titanium pocket clip would have been nice on this thing. But that's really the only issue with the pocket clip, is when you are handling this knife, it definitely bugs you. And I definitely noticed it when I was cutting through the cardboard. So I was going to move on to the dislikes about this knife, but that's basically the main one, is that little bill there. I think they should get rid of it. And you guys already know my thoughts on the thumb disc. I'm 50-50 on it, but if you guys don't have an issue with that, I mean, this is overall a great knife. This is one I would definitely recommend if you want to customize a knife, since it is full of liners, and you can do pretty much what you'd like with that thumb disc. Great design, great action, and if you're okay with replacing this pocket clip, then I would definitely recommend this knife. It's good overall, but that is the BTF, and we're going to move on to the next knife. Here we have the Hinterland, coming in at $205. You're getting carbon fiber scales, blue anodized titanium bolsters, and a milled titanium pocket clip, which has that really nice black wash finish. And that black wash finish is continued onto the S35VN steel blade. Again, just a big fan of that black wash finish. This is a clip point style shaped blade, nice belly to it, and with that razor sharp cutting edge from the factory. Flat ground up until or just below the fullers. Nice swedge here on the top of the knife, which I definitely think gives it some character. And we'll talk a little bit more about those fullers when it comes to the deployment method. Speaking of deployment method, you do have a stepped thumb stud, which is a single stud. I'm assuming they did it that way so that you can just swap it if you'd like, but more on that later too. You have really nice jimping here on the top, which is nicely placed. Thumb lands on it beautifully. So moving on to the handles, you do have that weave pattern carbon fiber. Again, beautifully done. As you can see, just really dances in the light. I love carbon fiber weave. I think it looks really, really good. They did add some little texture here, some fluted areas. Really nice tight fit up against the titanium bolsters, which again is anodized blue. Looks really, really good. Blue and black looks good. Even the hardware is blued out against the carbon fiber. You do get a bolster lock, so if you are left-handed, you're not gonna have any issues. And again, I think you can swap this stepped thumb stud, and you're not going to be fighting with pressure on the frame lock. So really nice that they did it that way. Moving on to the pocket clip. Again, they gave you enough space for those thick pant pockets. So beautifully done pocket clip. Another thing I really like about the pocket clip is they hid the hardware. So just a really super clean look. The action on this knife is really, really good. Fires right out with that stepped thumb stud. I kind of wish they had two thumb studs on this thing, even if it was stepped. I'm not a big fan of the stepped thumb stud, but it does function beautifully, so I can't really complain about the action when it comes to using that stepped thumb stud. Now when it comes to the fullers, you can use it to reverse flick. As you guys saw right there, it's a little tricky, but one thing I've noticed with these fullers is they're just not deep enough. I think if it was a smaller slit, or again just a little bit deeper, you can see the groove isn't that deep. I think it'd be a lot easier to reverse flick it. Now I will have a little bit more to say on this step thumb stud, but action is great. And we'll move on to the ergos. And I gotta say, this knife is amazing in hand. It fits like a glove. No hot spots. That pocket clip just disappears. And reverse grip is just as good. Super, super comfortable in the ergos department. So really zero complaints there. Access to the bolster lock is excellent. As you guys can see, they give you plenty of room to get in there. So no issues with that. The only issue really I have with this knife is that there is not two stepped thumb studs. I think it would have been a lot better because you can reverse flick it a lot easier, and even possibly just putting thumb studs would have been nice, but it's definitely something different. Takes some getting used to, but like I said earlier, it serves its purpose very, very well. Overall, definitely would recommend this knife. It slices through cardboard, no problem. And again, those ergos, really, really good. And definitely, definitely recommend it. So that's the Hinterland. And let's move on to the last knife. Last up is the Hellx. This is coming in at $49. You have natural canvas micarta scales, steel liners, and a steel deep carry pocket clip with that really nice black wash finish. Now, before I get into this knife, I want to mention that I'm not the biggest fan of button lock style knives, just because I've had one fail on me in the past, and I believe it was a Kaiser, so I just kind of lost trust in them. Not saying I'll never buy another button lock, it's just tough for me to decide on getting one. And also, I'm not trying to scare you guys off from this one because it functions beautifully. There's no issues with it. So with that being said, let's get right into it. I gotta say their finish on the natural canvas micarta scales is beautifully done. There's no frayed sections. The chamfers are really, really well done. And I love that black wash finish on the liners. Same with the pocket clip. As I mentioned on the other models previously, I love a black wash finish. And that black wash finish continues onto the blade. This is a D2 steel blade, and you have a clip point, drop point, Tonto-esque style shape to it. I'll let you guys be the judge of that, but you have the full, or not full, but flat ground bevels leading to that razor sharp cutting edge from the factory, a nice swedge up on top, and really, really aggressive jimping, which is nicely extended out. Again, your thumb landing on it beautifully, just the perfect spot for it, I think. And you do have some jimping on the flipper tab, which is just as aggressive as the top. And I also want to mention the jimping on the liners. You can see here, very aggressive as well. And it is through the black G10 backspacer. Very grippy there. You do have a very generous front finger choil, so plenty of room down there. Moving on to the pocket clip. Again, you have plenty of room for those thick pant pockets, so that is a plus. Again, deep carry, which really hides in pocket. But one thing I really like is how low the bill or the tip of this pocket clip is. Works beautifully, no issues going in and out of pocket. Now when it comes to the action on this thing, it's amazing just because you can see the flipper tab is well above that pivot pin. So this thing fires out. Riding on bearing, so the drop shot is really, really good. You guys can see very, very smooth. So no complaints in the action department. And that's the only form of deployment, but I've learned you can wrist flick it and spotty flick it if you'd like. Now, when it comes to the ergos on this thing, it is super, super comfortable. No hot spots. That pocket clip is low enough to not bother you at all. And when I was cutting through cardboard, it was just super easy, and it was a pleasure. So very, very nice ergos, even when you choke up on that thing. Very, very well done. Very well executed ergos. One thing I want to mention is that they do have this knife in a liner lock version, which is the version I really love. I think it's a little bit better just because of the strength of that liner lock, but the ergos are just the same on that version. And if you have large hands, I mean, look at that. You have plenty of room back there. So excellent, excellent large knife, especially for the price point. You're getting a lot of knife for 49 bucks. Really quick, want to give you guys some numbers since this thing is very large. You have a 4-inch blade. The handle is, let's see, 5.5 inches. And overall, just a little over 9 inches. Again, very large knife. Quick size comparison here with the Para 3. So a lot larger. See right there. And then the mini Benchmade, or sorry, mini Bug Out Benchmade. Obviously a lot larger. Now some of the dislikes I could pick out, or that stood out to me, were the pocket clip's a little bit wiggly, kind of side to side. Not terrible, but it's just something I noticed. But overall, I would definitely recommend this knife if you have large hands, or if you're just a fan of really good ergos and a button lock style knife. And I think I would definitely recommend the liner lock version more. But there is the full review on all these knives, which are all great knives, I think. Definitely would recommend pretty much all of them. Just depends on your taste, but they all slice through cardboard very, very well. I'd say my favorite out of all of these is the Arcus, just because it's a really nice gentleman carry. But with that being said, I just want to let you guys know that I'll put a link down in the description where you can pick these up at Kansept. Or if you guys go to White Mountain Knives, if they have any of these in stock, you can get 10% off at checkout with my discount code Nathan's Knives. So I'll leave everything down below if you guys are interested in any of these models. I hope the information helped. And as always, I will see you guys on the next one.